You don't need some asshole like me to tell you that Black Panther was one of the biggest success stories in the entire MCU, helped in no small part by a stellar cast of extremely talented actors, a prime slot at the tail end of the Infinity Saga when the momentum of the franchise was virtually unstoppable. I mean, Jesus, if Captain Marvel could make over $1 billion, then I think we can safely conclude that people were willing to watch pretty much anything with the Marvel name slapped on it. Not to mention a powerful socio-political movement that for some reason decided to make this movie its chosen champion, much to Disney's non-dismay. Either way, whatever its objective merits, Black Panther was a smash hit with critics and audiences alike. The question is, what happens when you take away all those vital props and advantages and replace them with nothing at all? Well, you end up with Wakanda Forever, a bloated, preachy, tedious, self-important, clumsily written mess of a film with an uninspiring protagonist, a tenuous plot, ridiculous action sequences, highly questionable morality, and the most boring, forgettable MCU villain since this guy. And apart from a couple of genuinely poignant and heartwarming scenes at the very start and end, it made me feel absolutely nothing. Well, apart from mild boredom and irritation. In short, just as I said on my stream the other day, Wakanda Forever is to Black Panther what Wonder Woman 1984 was to its predecessor. Both movies are proof that you can't catch lightning in a bottle, especially when your bottle's completely broken. Anyway, let's get the plot summary over with. And I apologise in advance for the lack of relevant footage on this one, but let's be real here, the film's just out and it's basically impossible to put anything comprehensive in without getting a copyright strike. But such is life. So the movie opens with Shuri working frantically in her lab in Wakanda. Her brother T'Challa is dying from an unknown illness, and the only thing that can save him is the magical bullshit herb that first turned him into Black Panther. I mean, I was under the impression that the herb grants permanent strength and health benefits after a single dose, but whatever. I guess if you get really ill, you have to take more to reinforce it or something. The problem is that all the herbs were destroyed by Captain Mega Kill from the first movie, so Shuri's only option is to try to synthesize a new batch. It's very clear that her work isn't going to be successful, and even Wakandan Jarvis urges her to give it up and be by her brother's side in his final moments, but she refuses to stop. She keeps working because it's the only way she knows how to deal with the situation. She's a woman grounded in science and technology, and she's used to finding solutions to almost any problem, but right here when she needs it the most, all of her knowledge and intellect can't help her. And well, the results are inevitable. It's a well-written, perfectly directed, and brilliantly acted scene that hits like a ton of bricks, and for a brief moment it raised my hopes that this film was about to defy my expectations and give me something genuinely awesome. Then I saw the rest of it. Skip forward a year or so, and all is not well in the Kingdom of Wakanda. Queen Ramonda attends a meeting at the UN to lay the smackdown on some toxic white males. Because of course, what other demographic could they possibly be? For the crime of expecting Wakanda to honour trade agreements that they already signed up for. Basically, the Wakandans had agreed to share their vibranium with the rest of the world to help them combat possible threats to global security, but now she's like, nah, it'll be fine, we're just gonna keep it all for ourselves. Why? Because they don't want other nations to become as powerful as them in case they turn against them.
Are you serious?
I'd like to point out that this is the same country who stood by and did precisely fuck all during multiple world-ending events, who refused to share any of their resources or technology with the impoverished African nations that border them, and who seems to think it's totally fine to conduct unilateral operations against nuclear-armed superpowers.
Hans, are we the baddies?
Damn, Wakanda, you're lucky you haven't been invaded and pounded into the ground at this point. It's a perfect example of a recurring phenomenon that I've noticed in the MCU in recent years that I can best describe as, it's okay when we do it. Failing to instantly distribute limited resources to a world population that effectively doubled overnight.
You've got to do better, Senator. You've got to step up.
But choosing to withhold vital natural resources that you have in such abundance that you could literally never exhaust them.
Wakanda forever!
Killing an enemy combatant in an active operation who literally just executed your best friend? That's a war crime right there. But conducting unsanctioned military operations in sovereign countries with innocent civilians all around?
The Dora Milaje have jurisdiction wherever the Dora Milaje find themselves to be.
Sheer fucking hubris.
Wakanda, it's okay when we do it. Also, for some reason, characters keep claiming that Wakanda is the most powerful nation on Earth now, but I'm genuinely struggling to understand how they reached that conclusion. They're a small Central African country with a grand total of 1 city, and they go into battle armed with spears, shields, and rhinos. Somehow I don't think they'd last very long in a war against America, or China, or Russia. Anyway, the upshot of all this is that the Americans start searching for other sources of vibranium that might exist in the world, and wouldn't you know it, they soon find some in the Atlantic Ocean. Unfortunately, the research vessel comes under attack by a bunch of blue fish people who kill the crew and steal the vibranium detector. Flash over to Wakanda, and Shuri and Ramonda are enjoying a nice heart-to-heart by the riverbank when this arsehole shows up and introduces himself.
My people call me Kung. But my enemies call me Namor.
Nah, fuck that. I'm calling you Ocean Man from now on, mate.
Ocean Man, take me by the hand. Ocean Man, what the fuck is he wearing? It's not Halloween.
Because the drinker has jurisdiction wherever the drinker finds himself to be. So Ocean Man is the leader of the blue fish people, who are another race of isolationist arseholes, this time living in the deep ocean. You know, at a certain point you have to wonder how many more ancient, previously unknown factions, cultures and nations are going to come out of the woodwork in this franchise. Anyway, whatever. Ocean Man's angry because he doesn't want humans poking around his underwater kingdom and stealing all his vibranium, so he wants the Wakandans to help him track down the scientist who made the detector machine so that he can kill her. Where do I even begin with this one? I mean, for a start, how exactly does Ocean Man know that this machine was constructed by one particular scientist? Did she write her name on it? And even if it was, what purpose would it serve to kill or abduct her now? As far as he knows, she would have left behind drawings, blueprints, all kinds of designs and technical information that people could use to construct another one. Shit man, even Tony Stark had to design his first Iron Man suit before he started building it. It would be like taking out Robert Oppenheimer after the bombings of Hiroshima. It's a bit late for that now, mate. The cat's out of the bag. Also, none of this means anything anyway because the Americans already know exactly where the vibranium is. I mean, do you really think that ship you attacked wouldn't have logged its position or been tracked by satellites, drones and global positioning systems or called in what they'd found before you killed them all? The fact that the ship was attacked in international waters would be a very obvious red flag to the Americans that they'd found exactly what they were looking for and that someone was trying to stop them. All of this puts the Wakandans in a pretty awkward position because the Americans believe they were responsible for the attack. I mean, if that's the case, then such an attack would definitely be considered an act of war that would almost definitely lead to military retaliation, but apparently everyone's chill about it for now, so whatever. Either way, the Wakandans have to do something, so Okoye and Shuri decide to go after the scientist and bring her in. And to find her, they contact Bilbo Baggins because I guess these movies haven't humiliated Martin Freeman enough yet. Oh, and if you want a little example of the fucking horrendous pacing of this movie that resulted in it almost being 3 hours long, then allow me to set the scene for you. So Bilbo Baggins is out jogging in the woods when a mosquito starts pestering him. He tries to swat it away, but it keeps hovering in front of him like it's trying to get his attention. Eventually he realises it's not actually a mosquito, it's a miniature drone that wants him to follow it. So he duly follows it through the woods, not suspecting that this could be anything sinister, where it eventually leads him to Okoye and Shuri. Fucking why? What was the point in any of this? If you wanted to make contact with the guy, why didn't you just hide behind a bush and grab him while he was running? Or wait on the path ahead of him so he'd literally run straight into you? I mean, you're already out in the middle of fucking nowhere anyway. Why did you have to lead him further into the woods? Why does this movie keep setting up stuff whose only purpose is to waste our time? Oh, and in case you're thinking this is just set up for some cool payoff later, it isn't. The mosquito drone is literally never seen nor mentioned again. Fucking awesome writing, guys. And of course, Bilbo immediately spills his guts and gives away vitally important national security information by telling them where to find the scientist, because that's what elite CI operatives are supposed to do, right?
Not a great plan.
Seriously, dude, how the fuck did you even get this job? So they go to the university where the scientist works, and wouldn't you know it, it's a 19-year-old college student named Riri Williams. Better known from the comic books as a cheap, idealized knockoff of Tony Stark, minus the flaws, personality, and charisma. And she also builds quantum supercomputers and Iron Man suits out of scrap materials in her spare time, because fuck it, of course she does. Honestly, I can't wait until we get to the point where weapons and technology are designed by 2-year-olds who invented surgical implements while still in the womb so they could perform perform a cesarean section on themselves. So Shuri and Okoye bring her in, but oh no, the FBI arrive to stop them. But that's okay because it's basically an excuse to have an extended chase sequence where Riri crashes an aircraft into a police barricade, almost certainly killing and injuring at least a dozen police officers for the crime of doing their jobs. But oh no, Ocean Man and his blue fish people show up and capture Shuri and Riri. Wait, does that make them Shuriri? Anyway, he takes them down to his underwater kingdom to persuade Shuri to join forces with him because apparently he's decided the best solution now is to kill every single person on the surface.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Never mind that Shuri isn't even the ruler of Wakanda and is therefore in no place to make decisions on behalf of her people. Don't think about it, just consume the products. But it doesn't matter anyway because T'Challa's girlfriend from the previous movie shows up to rescue them, and honestly, the character was so completely forgettable that I genuinely forgot she even existed until they brought her back in. Naturally, this makes Ocean Man extremely angry, so he attacks Wakanda by making everything a bit wet, and Queen Ramonda drowns while saving Riri. You've got to love how the Wakandans totally don't give a shit about the rest of the world, but they're also willing to jeopardize their entire civilization to save one girl they've never met. Then Ocean Man says that he'll be back in a week or so to get Shuri's answer about helping him to wipe out the human race, because truly there's no better way to win someone's cooperation than murdering their only living relative. Anyway, I guess it's time to bring this shit show to an end. So Shuri 3D prints a new magical bullshit herb from combining a bracelet from Ocean Man with T'Challa's DNA. Wait, what? In fact, nah, just forget it. Who even cares at this point? Then she becomes the new Black Panther and they all get on a giant submarine, which is definitely something I'd expect to find in a small landlocked Central African country, and they head out to confront Ocean Man and the Bluefish people. And their killer strategy to defeat him? Lock him in a room with some heaters to dry him out. You know, I'm not entirely convinced this movie isn't just some elaborate troll. So there's a whole bunch of CGI fighting and bloodless killing, and Shuri gets a spear shoved right through her stomach, almost severing her entire spinal column, but she's like, nah, it'll be fine. Then she blasts him with the afterburner from an engine and he gives up and everything goes back to the way it was before. And that's it, that's the plot for Wakanda Forever. Jesus fuck mothering Christ, what a mess this film is. Somehow managing to combine all the worst tendencies of the MCU, the overuse of bad CGI, the ridiculous levels of technology and power creep, the constant need to introduce next product, the shameless pandering and lecturing, with a script that feels like 3 different films hastily chopped up and patched together. The tragic death of Chadwick Boseman was a huge loss, both to Hollywood in general and to this film in particular, and clearly the script had to be rewritten to accommodate it. But what it really needed was a complete rewrite from top to bottom, and it absolutely didn't get it. What we have here feels rushed and haphazard, like characters were swapped around at the 11th hour without any thought for how it impacts the overall story. People can be having moody contemplations on the nature of loss, death and grief one minute, and then cracking jokes and smiling the next like nothing even happens. It's so weird and jarring, and it doesn't fit with the film's themes of how people cope with personal tragedy, partly because it's the MCU, so we can't go more than a few minutes without some forced goofy humour, and partly because this is all leftovers from a very different version of the scripts. Like I say, it should have been properly rewritten, but like everything with Marvel, it has to all be done as quickly as possible. We've got to produce new products every couple of weeks or people will forget that we even existed. Go, 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 don't think about it, just get it done. Speaking of things that totally don't fit with this film, Ocean Man has got to be one of the worst antagonists in MCU history, and that's fucking saying something, believe me. His backstory is tedious and convoluted, and delivered by a long-winded info dump that actually made me leave the cinema for a couple of minutes to go for a shit. And I couldn't believe it, but it was still going by the time I got back. He's not in the least intimidating or powerful to look at, you don't get a strong sense of what motivates him or what his thought processes are, and generally, he looks completely ridiculous. I mean, Killmonger wasn't exactly a complicated villain either, and I can't say his plan made a huge amount of sense overall, but you at least understood where the guy was coming from. Ocean Man says and does whatever the plot needs him to do to make the next thing happen, and that's basically it. There's a weak, half-arsed attempt to tie his personal experiences in with Shuri's and tease the idea that grief and sadness could ultimately turn her evil, but it doesn't work at all because the two characters are coming at it from wildly different directions. Again, a complete rewrite of the script from the ground up might have fixed this, but like everything else at Marvel these days, getting the next product out there was way more important than artistic integrity. Speaking of next product, Riri Williams is an absolutely pointless addition to this film. She's there because they needed a platform to launch the character, and this was the most convenient way to do it, I guess. She does almost nothing throughout the whole film, apart from killing police officers. She has no particular character arc or personal journey, and even her skill set completely overlaps with Shuri's. They're both insanely talented teenage mega geniuses who can build anything and solve any scientific problem, which kinda makes you wonder why we needed two of them.
I like her.
Why? Basically, she's just a plot device that people fight over, and for some reason, she's treated like the most important person in the entire world, like she really is the girl who's the key to everything. And while I'm talking about Shuri, I might as well get this one out there. She is a bad choice to replace T'Challa. I mean, come on, there was never any doubt that they'd choose a woman to be the next Black Panther, but why her of all people? Okoye would have been a much more logical choice, and even T'Challa's girlfriend might have worked, but Shuri's supposed to be a geeky side character. She's there to be snarky and funny. She doesn't have the depth or personality to take on this kind of role. I mean, don't get me wrong, she's definitely less smug and abrasive than in previous movies, but there's no getting around the fact that she's just not that interesting as a person. The fact that Letitia Wright makes a garden rake look morbidly obese doesn't exactly help when it comes to the fight scenes. She looks frail and awkward, even in the Black Panther costume, and I absolutely couldn't buy into her fight with Ocean Man. I'm also getting a bit fucking tired of Madam Hydra, who keeps cropping up in things just to remind us that she's a character that exists. Julie Dreyfus is a good actress, but she looks completely lost here, like she's got no idea what her character is supposed to be or why. And to be honest, I don't blame her because I don't fucking know either. Now, if I had to praise something about this movie, I'd say that the acting is generally good, especially from Angela Bassett, who pretty much carries the film on her shoulders. She's really going for it in pretty much every one of her scenes, and she commands attention whenever she's around. And holy shit, one thing's for sure, she's stayed in shape. How can you be 64 years old? Damn, I'd rather see her play the Black Panther than Shuri. As I hinted at before, the pacing of this movie is fucking abusive. Wakanda Forever clocks in at nearly 3 hours, and by god do you feel every minute of it. The pacing makes an Arctic glacier look like an F1 car. Scenes and conversations drag on about twice as long as they should because nobody can just get to the fucking point. Everything has to be accomplished in the slowest, least efficient way possible. Honestly, you could cut this film down to under 2 hours and lose absolutely nothing of value. And it's all padded out with dramatic action scenes that are unintentionally hilarious because of how inept they are, forced comedy that's about as funny as an episode of She-Hulk, and moral lectures that I could best describe as extremely flexible depending on who they're applied to. Which makes it doubly frustrating that the movie's final scene is a genuinely heartfelt and moving tribute to Chadwick. Quiet, dignified and thoughtful. In short, it's everything that Wakanda Forever isn't. Boseman was a man whose loss was clearly felt by everyone who knew and worked with him, but perhaps most of all by the movie that he should have been part of. And that pretty much wraps it up for me. But just before I leave, I wanted to thank everyone for the incredible response to the Rogue Elements Kickstarter that we launched. We've raised an incredible amount of money already that's going to let us do a whole lot of stuff that we never could have imagined before. And if by any chance you still want to be involved and follow the progress of this film behind the scenes, there's still a few days left to become a backer, so I'll put the link in the description. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.